Okay, thank you everyone today for joining us for the ASID Pennsylvania East Professional Development Webinar Series. My name is Kim Slater. I'm the Director of Communications. I'm here to welcome you to today's event. The Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID and ASID National are actually celebrating their 45th anniversary this year as the oldest interior design organization. ASID is not only the oldest and largest design organization, it's the only one where its members encompass all aspects of design: residential, multifamily, housing, commercial, workplace, healthcare, hospitality, retail, education, and institutional design. ASID inspires and enriches its members by providing knowledge, experiences, community, and professionalism of the interior design practice. ASID believes that design impacts lives, where we advance and inspire the interior design profession and communicate the impact of design to the human experience. We'd first like to thank our chapter sponsors who today's events can't be possible. First is our Ruby level sponsors, Bright Light Design Center and Fessenden Hall. Amethyst level sponsors are Kiefer's Appliances, Benjamin Moore, Hunter Douglas, Dow Tile, and Kravitz. Today's topic is NCIDQ Tips and Tricks webinar with our moderator, Allison Kapler, who is our student representative to the board and the recent graduate of Drexel's Masters of Interior Architecture and Design. So yay, Allison. And our panelist today is Faye Liff, who is an adjunct professor at Drexel and also works at Francis Kaufman Architects. So thank you guys for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please contact the email shown on the screen. That is Liz Kane, our Director of Professional Development, and she'll be able to pass on any questions after this presentation today. We will also make the video available afterwards on our YouTube channel. Just please allow a few days for it to post. So I'm gonna now go and kick this off, and you will have Allison and Faye for today's presentation.
Hi guys, thanks for being here. Yep, we have Faye here. She's actually a previous professor of mine as well, and a master when it comes to the NCIDQ. So she's going to take us through the exam, answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, whatever is easier, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. So over to you.
Thank you. All right. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much. It's nice to see such a huge turnout. Is my screen sharing is working correct? Everybody seeing the CIDQ? I am, as Allison mentioned, my name is Faye Leff. I went to Drexel and graduated with a Bachelor's in Accelerated Master's program, and I've been working in the field since 2013. And I've worked across a number of different commercial design fields: education, multifamily, commercial, office, etc. So that said, I have since gotten involved with CIDQ and become a CIDQ ambassador, which means that I give this presentation a couple times a year, sometimes to groups like this, sometimes to schools, and sometimes individuals will contact me just to sit down for one-on-ones about the exam. It's definitely a little overwhelming at first, so I think this presentation is a really good place to start if you're considering doing your exam. And hopefully we'll give you a little more comfortability with the process and the timeline, and then all you'll have to do is study. So let's get started. And as Allison mentioned, normally I would take questions while we're doing this webinar version. Let's save all the questions for the end so we can get through all the material. If anybody has any questions or would like to speak to me directly about setting up an appointment for a CIDQ ambassador, this is my email, and I'll be sure to share that at the end as well. So first of all, why do you want to take the NCIDQ? Certainly, you know, it hasn't always been the standard, but it has become the industry standard very quickly. I know, you know, for the firms that I have worked at, that they at least expect you to be on track working on your NCIDQ. If you haven't accomplished it yet, they want to at least see that you care and that you're interested in doing it. And to that point, it makes you a different candidate and sets you apart from people when you are interviewing. And not only that, but it's recognized by almost all regulated jurisdictions in North America, and it's not just specific to the United States. So there's a lot of benefits to it personally, but also it helps to define our profession and to give some credibility and recognition for the education that we go through to, you know, accomplish our career. So just kind of some background, and forgive me, I have to get a newer statistics slide on this to bring it up to 2020. But as you can see, from 2014 to 2018, the number of exam registrations has gone up pretty significantly in a pretty short amount of time. And it just sort of speaks to the fact that, again, this is becoming the industry standard. So we're going to cover the important information that you need to know: the exams, the deadlines, the dates, the fees, the whole application process, some insight into how things are scored, and then kind of the final step, which is getting your certificate. All of this information.
1 second, the slide isn't changing. It's still on the first slide for some reason.
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you.
Technical glitches all the time. It's okay.
Let me do this. All right, it says I'm sharing, but it looks like it's still showing the original ASID slide.
A second ago. I did see the PowerPoint a minute ago. It was just like the,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so again, here's my email. It's faye@fayleft.com. Anybody has any questions, please feel free, or if you want to do one-on-ones. And this is that statistical data on the number of exam registrants from 2014 to 2018. Good thing we didn't get too far, right? So again, all this information is available on the CIDQ website, and they're pretty consistent about updating and keeping things in line. And then again, there's a number of CIDQ ambassadors, both in Philly and across the country. And there's on the website, there's a whole place you can go and search and find somebody in your neighborhood as well. So basic breakdown of the exam. It's a 3-part exam, and you have to pass all 3 parts to earn your certificate. Starts with the fundamentals, the IDFX. Next, you have your professional IDPX exam, and then the practicum. So the first 2 are multiple choice. The last one is more drawing standards related. It is no longer done by hand, so lucky for all of you that did not have to take it that way. It's now done on a computer system, and there's a video later in this that'll show kind of what that looks like. So the IDFX exam, the very first fundamentals exam, as a student, you are allowed to take that in your final year of your design program or right after you graduate. You don't have to worry about getting your work experience in ahead of time. The IDFX is certainly exactly that. It's fundamentals. It's a lot of the kind of general design and code practices that you learn in school. I highly, highly suggest taking it right as you finish while that information is fresh. And also then you're not kind of scrambling to take multiple sections all at once. So the first 2 multiple choice exams are multiple choice, as I said. The FX is 100 questions. The PX is 150 questions. And as you can see, you get 3 hours for the first one, 4 hours for the second. And then the practicum is 124 hours. And it's a series of kind of pulling into hot spots, dragging and dropping, fill in the blank, and multiple choice. It is important kind of to note that the IDFX and the IDPX, the number of questions that you're seeing is these scored questions. There are 25 unscored questions that will be mixed in there as well. They're questions that they're testing out for the next series of the exam. So they won't actually count towards your score if you get them right or wrong. And I think some people can find that a little unnerving because obviously you don't know which ones those are, but they are in there and it helps to improve the testing going forward. So this is from 2018 regarding the rates of passing. So you can see the blue line is the actual percentage of passing versus the number of people who are in. I think personally, my opinion about why maybe people don't pass as well in the PX, I think that some people sort of assume because you have to have work experience before you do the IDPX exam, that perhaps they don't need to study as much. And so I think that we see a little bit of a decline in that. I would say that that's certainly not the case. If anything, I think I probably studied harder for the IDPX. It's a little more intense, and we'll see the breakdown of the sections that each test covers. And you can see that sort of the concepts of that one are a little more advanced than the concepts in the IDFX. So for the IDFX, this is the breakdown of how the test is broken out. So really the largest part is on construction drawings and specifications, and then followed closely by kind of all your technical drawing conventions, furniture, finishes, equipment, lighting, and then building systems and construction. So that's really probably 2/3 of the exam, and then the rest is the design communication, programming and site analysis, and the human behavior and design environment. So again, you can see why this is designed for people coming out of school, because it really, the bulk of it is focused on those standards and best practices in drawings and material selection and things like that. For the PX, so we're still carrying some of that same stuff into the PX. There is a lot of study materials available, and we'll get into those later, but a lot of them you buy for both exams, and it will highlight what areas cross over for you. But what we add in on the PX exam is a lot of this professional and business practice section, the project coordination, so a lot of like your construction administration processes, and then and again a whole section on construction administration. Otherwise, the product materials, the contract docs, the building systems, the codes and standards, those are the items that carry over from the last exam, but they're a little bit of a smaller chunk of the exam than on the IDFX. And then lastly, on the practicum, so again, the practicum is really about drawing standards and conventions, so it's a lot more focused on the actual contract documents, the codes, how building systems will integrate with your design, and then a little bit on programming and site analysis as well. So again, as I mentioned, previous to October 2017, excuse me, the practicum was all hand drawing. So now it is in a computerized format. There is no drawing required. It is not given in a specific software, so it's not in CAD, it's not in Revit. It's not even a drawing program. It's more of an interactive online test. So you can get time to practice this exam. You can purchase practice exams of it from CIDQ. But again, we'll see a video at the end that kind of goes through what that exam actually looks like and how it works out. I personally have not taken the computer exam. I've done kind of a couple of practice questions on it and watched the videos, but just my experience from having done the hand drawn to this is that this seems a lot easier, as well as it's sort of focusing on what the material that we actually want to be testing applicants on versus adding in the stress of drawing and drafting under pressure and under a time limit. And so again, this one, it's software specific. It's 120 questions. And what you'll get is you'll get 3 different case studies that relate to the drawings that you'll be answering the questions on, and you'll have that information that it's available. You can go back and reference it and look over it while you're answering the exam. So looking at breaking down kind of those parts of the exam, that contract documents, that large section, or the practicum, again, is really focusing on, do you understand how to draw detailed floor plans? What goes on a finished plan? What goes on a furniture plan? How elevation sections and details should not only graphically look, but relate back to the plans. Obviously, any code required drawings, your reflected ceiling plan, schedules, lighting, and then power and data and communications. So I'm going to see, sometimes this link does not want to play through PowerPoint. We will take a look. And I know that there probably won't be audio on your end, but the audio is not entirely necessary. So when you get into the practicum, you'll have this case study. You get kind of your steps to go through it, and then it will pull up this side window that has that programmatic information, any plans that are related to the questions you be answering, some lighting specs. There is a small code section. It is the NCIDQ codes for the testing. It's pretty close to IBC and ADA and all those, although it's not exactly the same because it's geared to be more generic for the purposes of testing. So you'll go through, you'll read your case scenario, you'll read through the information you have, and then you can always come back and reference that page again. And so this is sort of an example of what that drag and drop section looks like. So you'll have a detail with all of the call outs on the detail, and then a word bank of items that could go into it. Certainly it's a little more simplified. It's a little less time consuming as opposed to the previous one where we're actually drawing out the detail and then adding all of this in. I think there's some examples. And so same thing. So in this test question, you're putting in, it's asking you about best walls to place things on, and you're selecting a wall where you're doing conversions. So I think, in general, I think this way of testing is a little more approachable, and hopefully you will find it that way as well. This is available on YouTube, so you can look up this full demo and watch it some other time. So study materials, NCIDQ publishes a ton of study materials available for purchase. The very first book, that reference manual, is sort of your Bible for the NCIDQ. That works for all 3 exams and covers a lot of information. I will say drink a lot of coffee. It's not the most exciting read, but you need it to get through it. They also offer sample questions and practice exams for the IDFX and the IDTX. You can also purchase online practice exams of them from their website. And then again, for the practicum as well, there's samples. I have not personally used the book shown down here, the Interior Construction and Detailing, but I have seen it suggested from a lot of people in a lot of study groups for use for the exam as well. NCIDQ also has flashcards that you can purchase. I use those when I studied. I found them to be really helpful. It's a pretty huge packet, but it is color-coded between the IDFX, the IDPX, and the material that crosses over between the 2. There are tons of study groups available if you search kind of online or within your school, or go back to your professional organizations like ASID. I also am a huge fan of Q Practice. It's a website that provides not only just study modules, but a weekly group meeting, a study guide, a plan, on how to work through, and depending on which exam you're taking, you know, kind of specific, like, okay, read this part of the manual this week. Here's what we're going to practice. You send that practice stuff in, and there's somebody who will actually review it. And a lot of the people that work with Q Practice are former CIDQ test people who worked on the board to create the test and the exam, or who did grading of the test and the exam. Of a lot of the options, I do find it to be one of the least expensive ones. I'm in no way associated with them in any way. I just, for my practice, I found it to be one of the most helpful areas. And then, you know, again, I know in the past, and I would hope coming up again soon, ASID has done like 2-day seminars in the spring about the exam and how to prepare and how to study for them. So hopefully once we are out of COVID, those kinds of things will resume. Okay, so dates and deadlines. There's sort of a two or three step approach to how you have to get to the exam. So first you have to get your application approved, then you can register for the different exams, and then you actually have to go and take the exam. So exams are given twice a year, once in spring, once in fall. In order to get in for the spring exams, you have to get your application in anytime between July 16th of the previous year and January 15th of the year you plan to take it. And then the applications will get reviewed and approved by the 15th. You will, once you get approval, then you may register for the exam. And then they are actually given in the spring from April, the full month of April. So same thing for fall, kind of similar idea. Get the application in, they're reviewed, you hear back by the 15th. You can then schedule, and then they're administered during the entire month of October. Application process. So there are kind of, you know, there are two different routes to get through the exams. You can take the IDFX first when you are in school, you're just finishing school, and then take the IDPX after you get all your work experience, and the practicum after you get your work experience, or you can take them at the same time. So if you are going the route of taking it earlier, you will be in your final year, you'll be post-graduating, you'll apply for the IDFX only, you'll take and pass that exam, and then you'll work on getting your work experience hours moving forward. So it's kind of important to note that when you take the IDFX, the application for the IDFX only is only valid for 4 exam windows after you're approved. So if I applied this year and my application was approved right now, I would have to take the exam either October of this year, April of 2021, October of 2021, or April of 2022. So you basically have 2 years that you have to take the exam after you've applied, or else you have to reapply. There's costs associated with reapplying. If you are taking all 3 exams, then you will first get all of your education and work experience complete. You'll apply for all 3 sections, you'll take and pass all 3 sections, and then you will move on to your certification. If you go this route, your application is valid for 10 exam windows or 5 years. So you know, you do have quite a bit of time to take the exam, which gives you the ability, if you don't pass, to retake. But if you don't finish it within that window, then you do have to reapply. If you have not, please visit the My NCIDQ website. This is where the portal that you'll do all your application registering in. It's where you will get your grades and your scores back on the exams, and also where your NCIDQ certificate will live, and you can renew from there every year. So you'll go to My NCIDQ. You will apply for only the IDFX if you're going to do that route. Register online for the actual exam, picking your date, picking the time. You'll go to a Prometric test center and take your exam, and then your results will remain valid so that you can work on your work experience until you take the last 2 exams. So fees, this is usually where people start getting confused. So again, you first have to apply, and there's an application fee that is solely just to get your information in and approved to sit for the exam. The fee scale is for all three is $225. For just the fundamentals is $95, and for the professional and practicum after you've taken your IDFX is $145. So there is a little more, there's a little bit of cost savings if you apply for all three at the same time. But I mean, it's like $15 difference. So, I don't think it's certainly anything that I would worry about. And especially given the advantage of sort of being able to space out your studying and your exam taking. So once your application is approved, then you need to register for the exam. So the registration fees are sort of the actual cost for the exam for sitting and taking the exam. And these are the fees that you pay every time that you register for an exam. So if you do not pass and you have to take another exam, you will have to pay the registration fee again. So again, IDFX, $295, IDPX, $350, and the Practicum is $455. I think we pretty much just covered, so I'm not going to kind of beat it down. It is important to note that the registration fee is only valid for the exam date that you purchased, and it doesn't carry forward. There are a couple of scenarios where if you had to cancel ahead of time, if there's a medical emergency or something like that, that you may be able to move your registration fee to another date, but on the whole, don't expect that to happen. So certainly to that point, you don't want to register for an exam until you're sure that you will be ready to take it at that time. Again, there is, if you did sign up and you want to defer, there's $150 cancellation fee per exam, which the IDFX is $295 to begin with. So the fee is, almost half of the registration fee. And if it's unscheduled or uncanceled, then you will just forfeit the registration fee. So we're going to go over the eligibility paths for your schooling and work experience. There were a couple of handouts that were sent out. This is all available on the CIDQ website as well. And there's a couple different ways that this can be accomplished. Okay. Actually, I'm sorry, the work experience comes up after we go through the other method of taking all three tests at once, but we'll go through that as well. So then after you've passed your IDFX, you'll do your work experience. You'll come back and take the IDPX and the Practicum. So I like to put this slide in here. I've added this one. I think some people get a lot of anxiety about what is the test center going to look like, how am I going to be, who am I going to be sitting with. So this is what Upper Metric Test Center looks like. You have your own little study carrel. I wouldn't expect the newest or fanciest computers for sure. I've heard they have upgraded since I took mine, but I know my computer was pretty old and a little blurry. They do provide you with some headphones, some scrap paper, and I think it's important to note too that the people taking tests at these centers are not just NCIDQ applicants. They do testing for all sorts of licensing and different careers and things like that. So you might be sitting next to somebody who's doing a completely different test. So once you've passed, this is what your preliminary score report will look like. You'll have your actual, score for the exam and the test date, as well as it'll give you the breakdown of each of those major sections and how you did in each one of them. What I like about this, especially for the IDFX, is that now when you're going to work on your work experience, you can go back to your employer excuse me, and review the areas that maybe you need more experience in so that they can try to get you on different parts of jobs. For instance, like the programming and site analysis is usually not something that you get to do a ton of as a new designer. So being able to go back to your employer and say, I need to work in this area. Can you help me get in on a project or at least observe? This helps a lot. Excuse me, give me 1 second. And when you log into my NCIDQ, this is what the score report looks like online. This stays stored in your my NCIDQ, so you can always go back. I can go back and pull mine up now from I don't remember when I took it now, from many years ago. But again, it's nice because it has that breakdown of each of the areas. I think we kind of covered this already. So not currently, as I think most people are aware, licensing is sort of different jurisdiction to jurisdiction and across different states. However, the NCIDQ exam is pretty much the standard for most of those, but always check with your local jurisdiction to make sure that you're in compliance with their laws and regulations. And again, we can always reach out to these professional organizations for some assistance. And before I jump into the sample questions, just want to pull up some other items. Okay, so again, regarding that, that process of going through your education and your work experience to become eligible to take the exam. First, for your education, you have to be enrolled in either a CIDA or non-CIDA bachelor's or master's program, a bachelor's or master's program from another degree, and then an interior design degree. An associate degree, certificate, or diploma will require a different amount of work hours. So kind of any path that you're on, you can continue to do the exam. It's just a matter of how much work experience you'll have to gain. And again, same thing with if you're coming from an architecture degree. So also important to note, when you apply for the exam, you will be submitting, or when I say when you apply for your application to sit for the exam, you will be submitting your transcripts. It's, you actually have to have your school send the transcripts to you. Do not open the envelope, put it immediately in another envelope, and then send it into NCIDQ to maintain the integrity of the transcripts and the official records. It's a little bit of a process, but I like to, not that it's difficult, but I like to mention that because transcripts cost money, and if you order them and then open them up, now you've got to order it again. So then at that point, you'll either have taken the IDFX or you'll be waiting to take all three together, and you'll need to work on some work experience hours. Your experience hours are going to be confirmed by a direct supervisor or a sponsor. So and this kind of breaks it down. So your direct supervisor can be an NCIDQ certified interior designer, or a state licensed registered certified designer in the US or Canada, or a state registered licensed certified architect in the US or Canada. So this is somebody who you are working directly with and is doing a substantial amount of oversight on your work and knows what you've been doing. If you are in a situation where you do not have the ability to have a direct supervisor, you can get a sponsor. So a sponsor would really just be any one of, this NCIDQ designer or a state licensed registered architect or designer who agrees to review and certify your progress and your work experience hours. So it gives a little flexibility if you've worked somewhere where maybe there wasn't licensed designers available to oversee your work. As far as the work hours actually go and how that's certified, it's not like how the architects have to go through their process. Ours used to be a lot more complicated. There was a little more kind of breakdown of what areas you worked in or didn't. But at this time, it's really just a piece of paper that your supervisor or sponsor signs that says, so-and-so did X amount of hours here, X amount of hours here, and so on. So for instance, I actually managed to get my work hours done in less than 2 years because I was working a lot of overtime. And so I was able to just go to my employer and show my hours that I'd worked with them for the last year and a half or so, and then just have them verify that yes, she worked these hours. So as you can see, depending on the kind of degree that you've gotten, the amount of work hours varies quite a bit. And again, like these are based on 40-hour work weeks, which to be honest, I don't think many of us actually end up working only a 40-hour work week. So again, I ended up getting done a lot sooner. I also, too, if anybody is interested, I have a spreadsheet of the old version of the work experience hours that had the breakdown of all the different areas that they wanted you to get experience in. I think it's still helpful just to make sure that you're getting a well-rounded experience and that you're sort of getting at least a foot in a little bit of everything for design. And again, all of those hours, if they are covered by a direct supervisor or sponsor, all count. Previously, they counted differently if it was a sponsor. Okay. And so lastly, I did add in here a couple of examples of questions that you'll see on the IDFX. Normally when I give these in person, it's a little more interactive, but I'm gonna kind of scroll through them just so you get an idea about what kind of questions will be asked. So a lot of them, and I think too, it's important to note, there's not always one right answer and 3 wrong answers. Sometimes there are answers that are partially correct or you will get partial credit for it, just that there's usually like a better answer that they're looking for you to provide. So, you know, for instance, you could maybe make an argument for brightness being the answer to question 1, and that might perhaps have a partial credit, but in reality, the answer that they're looking for is contrast. Let me move forward. And again, kind of on questions like this where there's a lot of options in the multiple choice, it's important to be very thorough in reading. I think it's also important to pay attention to the cues, like when they are calling out things like most. That will also kind of help direct you to the right answer. Because again, there are answers in this question that could work that might be okay, but aren't the most likely. And so for example, in this answer, the last answer, D, is the correct answer. I think too, it's important when you're studying to try to make an effort of learning how to kind of analyze the questions. So again, looking for those hints like most likely, and then making sure if they're calling out like design development package, that you're considering what goes into that package versus a construction documents package. So for example, like number A would probably be more correct if it was a construction documents package. But for a design development level, it's really more about conveying the design intent, which is covered more by the drawings, indeed. And again, looking for hints like best diagram. And then in particular in here, talking about adjacency and relationships between multiple floors. So while an adjacency diagram would certainly be a great way to analyze adjacency, when we're analyzing adjacency across multiple floors, really we want to look at a stacking diagram. I'm so sorry, I'm like, got such a tickle in my throat today. So question 4, this one is certainly a little more direct. It's a little more to design standards that we use in practice and that you will gain from your work experience. I do think it's important to note that the exam is really broad in general to lots of different areas within the design field, but that also means that you will get questions about residential, you'll get questions about commercial. So if you are working in one of those areas, just keep in mind that you will sort of have to have some broad knowledge on all different areas. And so for question 4, our answer is C, 25 to 40%. Although I think you could even argue in today's climate with even more and more open office plans, that number could even push higher. I think, so this question I like to include, although I feel like the answer is not right. And I think it has to do with the fact that, again, the NCIDQ codes that you are to study for the exam are not IBC, ADA, etc. codes. They are very similar and loosely based, probably a little closer to like Nancy, I would say. but they are not direct word for word the same as the IBC. So it is very important to make sure that you are reviewing the code package that you get from the NCIDQ and from the study materials that you purchase. So for instance, in this one, the answer is supposed to be 10 by 10. I would argue that I think there are other answers in here that work if you're looking at true code. So lastly, this is the contact information for the CIDQ staff. When you are going through applications in that process, you will probably deal with Kimberly Woods the most. She is also the one who runs the CIDQ Ambassador Program. So if you're looking to reach out for anybody for that, she's a great contact. Very, very knowledgeable and very quick to respond. All right, so on that note, we can open up to questions.
Yeah, I have a couple that I can kind of start asking you. Thanks so much for reviewing that. Let's see. The first question is, if we begin the process of taking the test, would you list that on your resume, for example, written as achieving the NCIDQ certification?
Yeah, so when I was in that process, yes, I did list it. I did list, and if I was already registered, I would put, anticipating taking in spring 2020 or whatever. I think it's important, and I think it's important to bring it up and discuss it in your interview as well. Again, it kind of just shows your commitment to the profession and to advancing your career.
Is there a cost to keep your registration that you have to pay each year?
Yes. So every year you have to renew your license. There is a CEU, continuing education requirement, although it's actually pretty low. The requirement's higher for ASID or IIDA. So if you're in either one of those organizations, you'll be covered on that. The fee is, don't quote me, but I believe it's $75. So it's actually not even that much to keep it up.
Okay. The next question is, do you need to make sure your NCIDQ reference manual is up to date? I bought one and then the IBC 2018 came out. Should I get a new one?
No, so again, because it's not directly related to IBC, if you bought one not that long ago, I think you're probably okay. You also keep in mind, just because IBC 2018 came out, not every jurisdiction is using IBC 2018. So, and that's sort of why they keep the NCIDQ test code more broad, because it is meant to not have you having to constantly re-up and like you would for real code.
Right. Okay, great. The next question is, how much time do you recommend for studying? If we sign up now, do you think we would be ready to take it in the fall?
Okay, so we're in June, so you would have July, August, and September. Yeah, I think that would be adequate, and I believe if you if you go to that Q Practice website I mentioned, you can actually look at the study calendars that they suggest without having signed up. And if I'm remembering correctly, they start about 3 months out from the exam. So right now would actually be a really good time to begin to work on
that. Do you think it's too late for someone to take the test who has been practicing in the field for over 10 to 15 years?
Not at all. However, I wouldn't assume that just because you've been practicing 10 to 15 years that you don't need to study.
Are there different score requirements for each state?
No, so the NCIDQ and the CIDQ testing and certification are a completely separate entity from the state jurisdictions. It's just that these state jurisdictions will reference to that license to have. So the score is the same, it's just the passing score from NCIDQ, which now that I'm mentioning it, I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Let's see, we just got one more comment from Rachel. She said that the fall Q Practice study calendar starts on June 27th. So,
oh, perfect.
Perfect. Rachel. And let's see, I think the last question, unless anyone wants to add some more in quickly, is are there any particular study materials aside from the ones that you showed that you found to be helpful?
I mean, for my study, those are really the ones I use. So I got the blue NCIDQ manual. I got the study cards. I had the practice exam books, I honestly would say if you're looking to save money, I would skip buying the books, because the thing is that it's one practice exam. So you take it and then that's it. You know, you've already taken it. So how many times can you really retake it without kind of memorizing just blindly? And then the Q practice, like I said, the nice thing with Q practice too is they do have study exams that come as part of the package that you can just take over and over and over. And they have like a bank of questions that they pull from to go into that, and it changes them up every time. So you will get repeats, but you get a lot more review and practice on that one. There's also NCIDQ themselves sells online practice exams. I did not use those for my study, so I can't really speak to how effective they are or not. I mean, I know other people have used them, but I liked the idea of having continual access to go in and just, you know, I could just go in and do 20 questions every day and just kind of practice a little bit.
And we just got another question. Do you suggest taking all 3 tests in 1 month or take them all at separate times?
No, please don't do that to yourself. I mean, honestly, I can't even imagine taking more than one in an exam period. Maybe the IDFX and the IDPX, especially if you've been in the field a little longer, you might be able to do the 2 of those because there's a good chunk of crossover between the 2. But I mean, it's a lot of studying, and it's a lot it's a lot to prep for. If you were going to take 1 or 2, or excuse me, if you were going to take 2 in the same month, I would suggest scheduling them on opposite ends of the month. So maybe you're doing 1 on the 1st, 1 on the 30th. And then the practicum is such a different beast. I would just do that in a whole different testing period. And honestly too, I think I even ended up I took a testing period off between, because it's a lot. It's, you know, you're working and you're studying, and it's just a lot to handle.
And going off of working and studying, we just got another question that asked, how many hours a week did you study for the tests?
I want to say I tried to do at least 1 hour a day if I could. In the beginning, it was a little different because I was really kind of just reading through that manual, and it wasn't until I found Q practice and found that like study guide that they did that I sort of changed the way I studied. But I would say to plan on at least 1 hour a day. And then the flashcards, I would kind of just do the flashcards randomly. Like I would just carry them around with me and do them like 5 minutes around.
Yeah, you could do them like on the subway and
like I mean that's me. That's the way that I learn best. Like I work well with flashcards, so that was very convenient. And on that note too, actually, there is a phone app called Flashcards that you can go in and make your own flashcards for. So it's on your phone, but they also have decks that other people have created. So I know that there are some in there for NCIDQ studying. However, they're not made from NCIDQ. They're not verified by anybody, so take them with a grain of salt, review them, you know, make sure that they have the right answers. But that was more convenient too, because the actual pack of cards is about this big versus I always have my phone on me. So.
Right, yeah. Great. Okay, well, I think that's it. I think we got through all the questions, and thanks so much for taking the time. I know this really helps a lot of clarification for me, and I'm sure for a lot of the people here. So I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, we'll be sending out some PDFs that Faye showed, so you'll have a copy of those. And if you have any other questions, definitely reach out to Faye or Professional Development. And thanks so much for taking the time to be here, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And I'll also add too that if you feel like you need more follow-up and one-on-one, go on the CIDQ website, look for ambassadors in your area, and they'll be able to sit down and kind of meet with you and help guide you through the exam.
Bye. Thanks everyone.